Welcome to Leading by Example, upholding standards without compromise. I am your host, Dr. Vaughn, inspiring excellence, one lesson at a time. Are you ready to be better within your world and become the standard bearer within your organization or wherever you are? Leaders, aspirants, every one of you, all of us influence our culture, the organization's culture, our workplace's culture through actions taken both inside and outside of the workplace. I founded Ontero Solutions upon integrity, customer satisfaction, and attention to detail, specifically executive coaching and leadership development. Join in for fun, practical, and educational stories as I share lessons, both the good and the bad, that I have learned in my 20 years of leadership and management experience. Leading by example starts now. Everyone, and welcome to another episode of our radio show, where we explore the real issues that challenge our standards, inspire change, and help us lead by example in a world that sometimes forgets what matters. I'm your host, Dr. Vaughn, and I'm thrilled to have you join me. So today, I am joined again by my esteemed host, Dr. Terrance Sanders, and we have some really good content for you today. So we're continuing our series, The Voice of Virtue, Communicating. And you know what? Anyway, in the first episode, we discussed how leaders can establish and maintain credibility when communicating ethics and integrity. We also talked about how leaders can use communication skills to inspire ethical behavior within their organizations. So in this second episode of the series, which is titled Ethical Dilemmas in Modern Leadership, we're going to talk about how contemporary leaders face and communicate ethical dilemmas. And we have some really good case studies that we're going to share. So again, today I'm thrilled to be joined by my great friend, and I'm just going to tell you, he's my brother-in-law. Okay, I cheated. It's my brother-in-law, Dr. Terrance Sanders. Today
Thank you, Dr. Vaughn.
Well, you are welcome. So today we're going to talk about one of, again, the most pressing challenges in modern leadership, which is navigating ethical dilemmas and communicating those decisions effectively. We're going to tackle several significant questions, such as what are the most common ethical dilemmas leaders face today? What frameworks or guiding principles can assist leaders in navigating these ethical challenges? And why is emotional intelligence crucial in addressing ethical dilemmas? So let's get ready to learn some practical tools and tips. Dr. Sanders, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Dr. Vaughn. It is a pleasure to be here. And I know you and I both struggle trying not to disclose our relationship, but it is indeed a pleasure to be able to say my doctor's sister-in-law giving me this opportunity to discuss a lot of these complex topics that our leaders are faced with. And this is a great topic. This is a relevant topic. And as we look at the leadership landscape, as a leader, I use the acronym FIT when it comes to ethical challenges. And it is my guiding principle as a leader, where FIT stands for fairness, I stands for integrity, and T stands for trust. These three simple principles go hand in hand with how leaders, I believe, should be fit to handle dilemmas that's impacting the organizations themselves and creating a positive impact for overall sustainment.
Oh, I like that. You started us right out with a whammy, straight over the nickels, right? Like Homer the Clown with that bag of nickels. I appreciate that, though. I like that fit. I'm gonna steal that. I like that.
You can have it.
Awesome. Thank you, brother-in-law. So we're going to jump right into some of the common ethical dilemmas in leadership. So ethical dilemmas are an unavoidable part of leadership. Okay. So, and they often arise when leaders have to choose between conflicting values, priorities, or stakeholder interests. So, Dr. Sanders, can you please discuss some of the most common ethical challenges that leaders face today?
Certainly. One of the most prevalent dilemmas is conflict of interest. For example, leaders may need to make decisions that benefit the organization, but could create the perception of personal gain. Maintaining transparency is vital in such a situation, and this is very crucial. Another common issue is misusing resources or authority. These scenarios can erode trust if not handled ethically, whether through financial mismanagement or inappropriate use of power.
Excellent points. you had touched on just ever so lightly on conflicts of interest. That is a super duper huge one because I as a contractor, a government contractor, I fall in that little gray zone almost all the time. Every little thing
Yes,
can be viewed as a conflict of interest. So thank you for highlighting that. But I would also emphasize the importance of transparency and decision making, right? So as stakeholders demand greater accountability, leaders must find ways to be open about their decisions without compromising sensitive information. We talk about being open and transparent, and not having, sorry about that, not having pretense, but everything is not, available for consumption for all, right?
correct.
Need to know. So, there's also the challenge of balancing profit with ethical practices. And companies are almost always under the pressure to deliver results. But cutting corners on sustainability or fair labor practices can backfire both ethically and reputationally. So let's look at how some well-known leaders, have navigated some ethical dilemmas. The first is Tim Cook and Apple's stance on user privacy. So, Brian Law, can you walk us through how, this case, Dr. Sanders, walk us through?
Yes, of course. Let's take a look at Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and his stance on user privacy. In 2016, Apple encountered a significant ethical and legal challenge when the FBI sought access to unlock an iPhone belonging to a suspect involved in the San Bernardino terrorist attack. The FBI reached out to Apple for help in getting around the phone security measures to obtain possibly important evidence. The request, presented as an essential for national security, created a substantial ethical challenge for Apple to either comply and jeopardize user privacy or to decline and risk backlash for possibly obstructing a criminal inquiry. Now, let's walk through this just a little bit. What were the important ethical considerations involved? Well, user privacy was one versus national security. Apple was establishing a strong reputation for safeguarding user privacy and securing data, which makes complying with the FBI request feel a little like a possible compromise of data. And so Apple, it was going against their fundamental principles. On one hand, refusing to grant access to the phone might be interpreted as hindering the pursuit of justice. So there had to be an establishment of a benchmark. Developing a tool to access the phone might be a slippery slope by establishing a benchmark for future governmental requests, leading to worries and potential misuse in different situations. Or nations will think it's a weaker way of controlling democracy. And then when we look at the worldwide consequences, choosing to weaken security in a single instance might spark requests from governments around the globe, eroding confidence in Apple's offering. And so, how did Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, manage this situation? Well, he did something that was brilliant. He publicly refused. Tim Cook shared an open letter with Apple customers detailing the company's choice to decline the FBI's request. In the letter, he expressed that establishing a backdoor to circumvent the phone's encryption would jeopardize the privacy and security of all Apple users. Cook stated, and I quote, "The consequences of the government's requesting are unsettling. If the authorities can tap into one device, they will potentially tap into any device." And it reminded me of that movie with Will Smith and Gene Hackman, The Enemy of the State. And as Will Smith was trying to find out information, and he became the enemy of the state because the government was trying to establish what issues that was on this encrypted device. But what Tim Cook, he presented this matter as one of safeguarding wider user privacy rather than merely adhering to an individual request. Cook resonated with the public principles regarding data security and digital liberty. Therefore, Tim Cook promoted privacy as a core principle. Again, Tim Cook used the fit without even knowing he used the word fit. fairness, integrity, and trust. He established Apple as a front runner in the movement for privacy rights. He highlighted that the company's decision was not a matter of breaking the law, but rather about maintaining ethical standards and safeguarding users against possible abuse of power. And so the actions that he took, Apple took a stand against the FBI. And for anyone taking a stand against the federal government, it is daunting. And as you can tell, when he took a stand against the FBI request in court, he emphasized the important use of privacy and digital security. He expressed that Apple engineers would refrain from creating tools to circumvent security features, as doing so would compromise trust in the company's bottom line and products. And so transparency and clear dialogue with stakeholders was extremely important. And so his open letter that I talked about in quotes and other details in that letter emphasized that he wanted the customers and the employees and the stakeholders and the shareholders to feel confidence in Apple's position. His approach to sharing ideas centered around three things: transparency, consistency, and empathy, meaning understanding. So when we take a look at transparency, clearly he wanted to outline the potential dangers of establishing a backdoor. Consistency, ensuring that the decision reflects the Apple's enduring dedication to its users. Empathy and understanding, he recognized the issue with, and he felt sorrow for the San Bernardino incident while supporting the wider moral consideration of the FBI's request. And so how did that end up? What was the results? Well, legal and public opinion. When you look at the legal and public opinion of this situation, FBI ultimately, they retrieved the phone data through a third-party tool, circumventing Apple's participation. This made the case irrelevant from a legal perspective, but maintained Apple's ethical position. Public sentiment was mixed, with some applauding Apple's decision for safeguarding privacy, while others condemned the company for not aiding in the San Bernardino case. However, the decision by Tim Cook really emphasized Apple's reputation. His stance boasted his identity as a leader in privacy, setting it apart from its rivals. This viewpoint struck a chord with those customers who are worried about their data, breaches, and surveillance. Then the long-term advocacy, it was equal to the ongoing support. Tim Cook was and has consistently promoted privacy as an essential principle, pushing for more stringent privacy regulation and calling out other tech companies and firms for profiting from users' information. Now, let's take a look at what are Tim Cook's takeaways from his position as a leader. What Tim Cook did was he prioritized value, his core values, which is he wanted to illustrate trust as a leader. It's about adhering to one's values, even when faced with significant outside challenges. And you can't get more significant than the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, doing an audit on or asking for your assistance in an investigation. But he wanted the trust of the people. Then transparency. He wanted to communicate an open dialogue by directly confronting the issue and offering a straightforward explanation. Cook eliminated uncertainty and preserved the confidence of stakeholders. Then he balanced ethics and business strategy. Apple's commitment to privacy not only adhered to ethical standards, but also supported its long-term business strategy, guaranteeing customers loyalty and satisfaction. So why does this case matter and why is it so significant? Well, it's significant because the situation involves Tim Cook and Apple. It highlights how leaders can address ethical challenges by ensuring their choices reflect the organization values, engaging in open communication, and taking into account the wider consequences of their decision. The emphasis of the significance is consistency. That is where you're fostering trust and you're upholding credibility in today's complex digital landscape. That's why it is significant and that's why it matters.
Mhm. I love that case study for so many reasons because I remember when that happened, right?
Wow. Yes.
And I remember thinking, give it to him. It's a criminal investigation. But,
Right.
looking at his stance, I fully appreciate that. And, fast forward to now, I'm a small business owner and it's like it just, I love learning. I learned so many things from case studies, right? So it's basically,
Yeah.
if you don't, what's the saying? If you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. So
Absolutely.
he had to know what he stood for going into this
Right.
because if he didn't, he could have been topsy-turvy all over the place,
Right.
right? And then, think about the bigger issue as well, how people always feel like the government is spying on them through their phones or,
Right.
whatever. So the fact that he shut that down I think was, phenomenal.
It was brilliant, and it was at risk of not only his reputation, but the company at large,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a slippery slope. If you let one thing pass, then every time they want to do an investigation, they will
Yeah.
come to you and you're granting them access. And so you lose trust and you lose your integrity. And it
Mm-hmm.
demonstrates who gets the access. Is it because those with money can have access? Or if they have money, you don't allow them to have access. So that's where the fairness comes into play.
I give him a high five because he said no to government.
That's exactly. And that's not, but again, I applaud him for that. And it
Mhm.
was a challenge.
And just, but even outside of like that, the context of the decision that he had to make, just think about as a leader, what message that sends about some of the decisions we have to make, and that lonely stance, making that
Yeah.
unpopular decision. Some
Yes.
people have not even been. I don't think I've been. As a matter of fact, I know I haven't. Living here, little old Woodbridge, I know I haven't been tested like that. But just think about that, and it's like
Right.
seeing what he dealt with. Ask yourself, would you be ready? Are you
Yes.
ready? For
Right.
a challenge of that magnitude? And what decision would you make?
Right. Because you have to understand in the boardroom, there's a lot of people that are agreeable, and then there are some people who are disagreeable.
Mm-hmm.
And then are the people who are disagreeable, are they doing it out of spite? Are they disagreeable because they have their own motive? Or are they agreeable because they don't want the backlash from the federal government? More and more of them finding that there's other things that is out there. And so sitting in that boardroom and allowing the back and forth was probably very stressful for a leader to say, I'm going to take a stand. And to take a stand dealing with those that agree and those that disagree is something that he had to wrestle with
Mm-hmm.
for days and weeks and months, and then to come to his own resolve to say, I'm not going to allow them to have that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take a stand.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud him for that.
And so the show prior to this one, I talked about how, leaders, when we're making ethical decisions, we have to make sure that the decision, that it comes from a place of, genuineness, that you're
Yes.
able to, lace your decision with empathy about how that decision would impact, those that will be affected. And that
Yes,
sounds exactly like what Tim Cook did.
he did. Absolutely. Bottom line.
Well, check
I,
this out. We have another good one, right?
yes.
Another good
Yes.
case study. I love case studies. So this one is one of my faves as well. Warren Buffett. He's my hero.
Yep.
One day I'll be like him. One day, but this was his ethical dilemma about insider trader allegation at Berkshire Hathaway. So in 2011, David Sokol, a top executive and potential successor to Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway, became caught up in an insider trading scandal. He had acquired shares of Lubrizol Corporation, a company that he later suggested to Buffett as a possible acquisition for Berkshire Hathaway. So following Berkshire's announcement of this acquisition, the value of that stock skyrocketed, which prompted questions about a possible conflict of interest and ethical misconduct. So this incident posed a significant ethical dilemma for Warren Buffett, who is one of the world's most respected investors, known for his integrity and his strong ethical principles. He faced the challenge of addressing potential wrongdoing within his company while maintaining transparency and trust with his shareholders and the public. So these were some of the key ethical issues at stake. There was a conflict of interest. Sokol's actions raised serious concerns about conflicts of interest and the ethical responsibilities of executives. Reputation of Berkshire Hathaway was at stake. Under Buffett's leadership, Berkshire Hathaway built a reputation for ethical investment practices, and there comes this. So, this scandal threatened to undermine the public's trust in this company. Everything that Warren Buffett had, worked so hard to build. Transparency with stakeholders was also at stake. Buffett needed to handle the situation to demonstrate accountability while protecting the company's credibility. And then succession planning. This was so huge. So as a potential successor, Sokol's behavior cast doubts on, his ethical standards and, his ability to ethically lead Berkshire Hathaway, after Warren Buffett. So, that was relooked. And that's something that we have to, consider and think about too when we're doing succession planning. It's not so much about, who has, the management stamina or, the great ideas. You got to look at how this person, their integrity, their character. This instance right here took that dude out to run it. Okay. If that, much as I like Warren Buffett, I would have boohooed for years. But anyway, this is how Warren Buffett handled it. When the allegations came, he acted swiftly. He didn't marinate on it and wait to see if it was going to die down. He acted swiftly to address the situation. So that's key for all leaders. Tackle it right then and there. Sokol resigned from Berkshire Hathaway shortly thereafter. And then the insider trading allegations were revealed. In a statement, Sokol claimed that, I resigned, but it wasn't because of that. But Buffett's decision to disclose the resignation by acting swiftly, suggested otherwise. So he didn't give any room for rumors to fester and grow. He shut that thing down, my hero. And then also Buffett maintained transparent communications with his stakeholders, his shareholders. He maintained his reputation for transparency by addressing the issue in detail during Berkshire Hathaway's annual shareholder meeting. He acknowledged, the incident, openly admitted that, Sokol's actions violated Berkshire Hathaway's ethical standards. And then he provided clarity. I talked about in a previous show how, you want to stay away from, jargon and complex terminology. He was very clear in his words. He explained the timeline of events. He explained dude's involvement, and he ensured that there was no ambiguity about what had happened. And then his commitment to transparency, showcased his readiness to confront uncomfortable situations directly, which further strengthened the trust that shareholders had placed on him. This also served to reinforce the ethical standards that he had set. Warren Buffett used this incident to emphasize Berkshire Hathaway's commitment to ethical business practices. He emphasized that integrity and ethical behavior were non-negotiable values. And then he also acknowledged that the incident exposed gaps in the company's oversight process. So he was honest about that, right? How many of us as leaders can go back and say, you know what, I see a hole. I didn't get it all right. Let's go back and fix this. And I'm gonna let you know where the holes were so we can fix this. And he also, from that gap, he saw that there was a need for stricter controls. So, this right here is just like, this is the blueprint, for
Right. Yeah, it is.
But all of this, the outcomes were, while Sokol said he didn't do anything wrong, his corporate career was essentially over at Berkshire Hathaway. Buffett protected Berkshire Hathaway's reputation, but more importantly than all of that, I think the way Buffett handled this, it solidified or cemented his image, his legacy as a principled leader who values integrity over personal relationships or convenience. So I'm just like high five to that, because just think about how unpopular that could have felt dealing with that.
Right.
I love me some Warren Buffett, and also he's the same man that said I ain't leaving my kids nothing. But yeah, I like me some Buffett. And this is one of his quotes, and it's not exact, but this is what he said. He said, "Lose money for the firm, and I understand, but if you lose or you mess up our reputation, I'm gonna be mad. I'm gonna have to come for you." So I love it. His philosophy underscores why he took such a firm and public stance with this whole, case. And, he understood that maintaining the trust of shareholders, employees, and the public was more valuable than protecting Sokol. So
Right.
sometimes you just gotta, put people on that little, that funeral pyre and you set them on fire. You know what I mean? That's kind
Right.
of like, but Warren Buffett is still winning.
Yeah, he
Still winning.
is. He
Mhm.
is.
So this is like a case study on, on various aspects of leadership for all of us. But, again, the key takeaway was the swift and decisive action, transparency as a core principle, reinforcing organizational values. So again, you got to know what those organizational values are to
Right.
reinforce. And then personal integrity as a leadership pillar.
Yeah.
So he held that, in his core, personal integrity. It wasn't just something that reflected the organization. This is who, Warren Buffett is. And again, so, this case is super duper important for a variety of reasons, but it's a powerful example of how leaders can navigate ethical dilemmas without compromising their values. So boom, I loved it.
Yeah.
One of my faves.
Yeah, that's a great case study, and it really highlights the image and the reputation of Warren Buffett, and it is still prevalent now. He started, he started in the business of understanding financial stocks and things of that nature at an early age, and he built on that from just his small investment in his small investment company to where he is right now. And so he's not willing to compromise his name, his image, his reputation. And I love that quote. He said, lose money for the firm. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
There are some times that the stock will not bounce the way you would expect it to bounce. However, if you lose a shred of reputation for the firm,
You can't get that back.
I'm coming after you.
I'm coming for you.
I'm coming after you.
Yeah, that's hard to win back.
It
And
is.
that people don't think about when, when we're talking about, IT disaster recovery, business continuity. Sometimes people forget about reputation. They're so focused on like, the data or,
Right.
particular systems and being able to, get this system back up and, being able to get back on a particular, application. What about the reputation that's going to be ruined?
Right.
You know what I mean? That right there is priceless.
Absolutely. And I think our society today is more focused on, they're not focused on truth. They want to generate what their perspective of truth is, so it accommodates them instead of establishing where truth lies when it relates to facts. If you see that a stock is about to lower and you're not really comfortable, you can lose money for the firm. But if you're doing some insider trading that is going to cause the company to lose its reputation, then you need to make sure that you bring that to all of the stakeholders so they can make a decision on the direction that they need to move or not move. And so it is important that as leaders faced with these type of ethical challenges, they focus more not on themselves, but one, focus on the firm, the company. And then if you make the right choices, then you'll be able to be successful moving forward.
Yes, that transparency is so key. So Dr. Stevens, for the interest of time, we're not going to talk about Wells Fargo. That's another favorite of mine because I still got my little Wells Fargo card. But anyway, we're gonna jump to guiding principles for ethical leadership. So again, these two case studies, Warren Buffett and the one that you talked about prior to like I said, I love me some Warren Buffett.
Tim Cook.
Yep, Tim Cook, Apple with Apple. These cases highlight how leaders' actions and the way they communicate during ethical dilemmas can shape their legacies for better or worse. But in their instances, it was for the best, and that's what we all want, right? But let's shift a little bit to discuss some frameworks. How can we be more like Tim Cook and Warren Buffett? What are some principles that can help leaders navigate these ethical dilemmas? So share with us some tools that leaders can use to make sure that we're making the right decisions.
Okay, great. One of the things that I think will be beneficial is a timeless framework. It is like a four-way test which you can ask yourself. One, is it the truth? Two, is it fair to all concerned? Three, will it build goodwill and better friendship? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? These questions help leaders evaluate decisions from multiple angles. Another helpful approach is understanding utilitarian or deontological ethics, balancing the greatness or the greatest good for the greatest number with adhering to the principle even when it's inconvenient.
Mm. Great points, great points. And just a little plug. So I'm putting together a class, just a little
Okay.
small on the platform, utilitarian versus deontological ethics.
Uh-huh.
And only because it struck a chord with me, because when I was preparing for my dissertation, we had
Yep,
to do this
exactly.
little lead up to it, and I had to, do a paper, and I was just like, I had no idea what all that was.
Right.
You know what I mean? That it was a thing. We just knew in the military we got an ethics training, right? But
Right.
there was like certain principles to it. So I'm going to do a class because I think it's just so important for people to be aware of, and it'll be
Right.
some free training,
Absolutely.
quick little class. But again, those were great points, Dr. Sanders. But I will also add that emotional intelligence is crucial or critical in ethical.
Absolutely.
Again, empathy and self-awareness. It helps leaders to, consider how their decisions are affecting others and shaping their communication, to build trust.
And I think what is true is that leaders who combine all of these principles and they are clear with their communication, they're honest, they are better equipped to handle even the toughest dilemmas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. So far we've explored common ethical dilemmas. We've looked, we've analyzed some real world case studies, too. And then we talked about some guiding principles for navigating these challenges. But, as we wrap up this episode, we want to focus on a critical question. How can leaders actively improve their ethical leadership? We talked about one, which was, getting some training. But improving ethical leadership isn't just about avoiding a crisis, because crises are going to come. It's about proactively fostering a culture of integrity, which is so
Absolutely.
key. Do not let your integrity, ever be violated or compromised, right?
Right.
Dr. Sanders, help us break this down. Where do you think leadership begin?
Well, I think, and that's a great question, Dr. Vaughn, improving ethical leadership starts with one, self-awareness. Where is our foundation of who we are? Again, what were those guiding principles that showed us our values, that showed us our worth? Leaders need to understand their values, their bases, their biases, and decision-making tendencies. Being self-reflective helps leaders identify areas where they might unconsciously prioritize convenience over or profit over ethics. A practical step is to regularly ask yourself, how do my questions or how do my decisions align with the values I want to uphold? And more importantly, how do they impact others, both inside and outside the organization? This kind of introspection lays the foundation for ethical growth.
I love that. And, I love that you mentioned self-awareness, because it is so key. And, not just self-awareness, but like honest, self-awareness. Be honest with yourself
Yes.
about,
Yeah,
your
exactly.
shortcomings and your flaws. And it's so funny, not funny, but, when you do, like when you actually sit there and you reflect, like some stuff, I mean, catch myself, I'm like, you a bit ratchet. You need to get yourself together. You know what I mean? This is me
And
talking to
that's
myself.
fine. Absolutely. You should talk to yourself, because that way your thoughts are coming out and you are acknowledging, you're kind of being reflective, and being, reflexive can be an essential tool to finding out what is true, and you can make the decision from the thought that just came into your head. So that's very, very refreshing.
Yeah. And, again, we're all human, so I had to remind myself, as hard as you strive every day, to be
Yes.
better, you still human, and you get tripped up by human stuff, so, that self-awareness, it gets back to that. Like, why did I have that response? You know what I mean? So, but
Yes.
anyway, again, so, in addition to self-awareness, another tool is empathy. We talk a lot about empathy and active
Yes.
giving people our full attention and asking meaningful questions.
Absolutely.
Sometimes,
Mindfulness. Yes.
and for me, I'm task focused, so I have to catch myself. Again, that's that self awareness. When people like, I'm like, you're giving me too much. I need less. Like, I got stuff to do. Like, come on. But I have to remind myself, Vaughn, be present. This is really important. You're gonna miss something good.
Yes.
So, do you have some techniques for fostering empathy in leadership?
Yes. Yes, I do, Dr. Bond. One technique I recommend is perspective taking exercise. When faced with a tough decision, imagine yourself in the shoes of each stakeholder involved. Then imagine how the decision would affect them emotionally, financially, and socially. For an example, consider how it will impact employees, customers, and even the community before implementing a cost cutting measure. For each role, I want you to ask the following question if you were that person. What are the employees or customers' priorities, their needs or goals in this situation? Next, ask this question. What emotions might the employee or customer be feeling? Third, what assumptions or biases might the employee or customer have? And fourth, what solutions or compromises might employees or customers consider acceptable? This allows you to place yourself in their shoes by understanding what it may cause or what effects it may have on them before you make a decision. So that is the idea of perspective taking exercise. So when leaders actively engage in this process, they're more likely to balance ethical consideration with business needs.
Yeah, those are some excellent examples, Dr. Sanders, and I love all of them because again, like I said, with the self-awareness thing, I have to be real with myself. Like, okay, all this stuff you're trying to talk about in your radio show, you need to put it to practice, for yourself. So,
Yes.
Dr. Sanders, for the interest of time, because I know we're running out of time, and I totally hate that. Do you have any parting thoughts on how leaders can, integrate the strategies that we've talked about so far during our show?
Well, my final thoughts, Dr. Bond, is that improving ethical leadership is a journey and it is not a destination. Like I spoke in my open remarks, you have to have that fit as a leader: fairness, integrity, and trust. So as you're doing this journey, you're making intentional efforts every day to align decisions and actions with values. And it's not something leaders do alone. Building an ethical culture requires collaboration and shared accountability. When leaders model ethical behavior, they inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect throughout the organization.
I love that word ripple. I use it in my previous show because, an upcoming episode, we're going to talk about the ripple effects, like,
Oh,
when
good.
good and how it reverberates throughout the organization. So yeah,
Absolutely.
ripple is going to be our new word. But again, Dr. Sanders, that was beautifully said. To our listeners, improving ethical leadership starts with your values, empathy, commitment to transparency, and a willingness to grow. So we encourage you to reflect on one actionable step that you can take this week from this show to enhance your ethical leadership. Whether you practice active listening, explore a new ethical framework, or engage your team in a discussion about values, every step counts. And think about Tim Cook and Warren Buffett's examples. I mean, hey, that's like those should be like right here in the forefront of your mind. When you get caught up in a situation, what would Tim do? What would Warren do? You got some right there. So with that brings us to the end of this thought-provoking episode of The Voice of Virtue, Communicating Ethics in a Cynical World. Today, we've tackled some of the most pressing ethical dilemmas modern leaders face. We've examined some case studies highlighting successes and missteps. We've explored guiding principles for navigating tough decisions and discussed some actionable strategies for improving your ethical leadership. So if there's one thing we hope you take away is this, that ethical leadership isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about standing firm in your values, even when the path is challenging, because it will be challenging. So by embracing empathy, transparency, and accountability, leaders can inspire trust and create a lasting culture of integrity, like Warren Buffett and Tim Cook.
Absolutely, Dr. Bud. And for our listeners, remember that every decision you make as a leader is an opportunity to lead by example and reinforce your organization's ethical foundation. Whether you're facing a tough choice, guiding your team, or reflecting in your leadership style, keep asking yourself, how can I align my actions with my values and how can I communicate those decisions effectively?
Awesome. And like we always talk about before, leadership is tough. So you think about this stuff right here, all while you still have the organization mission at the forefront of your mind. Okay. It's a lot. We get it,
Absolutely.
but we're just here to give you some tools. So, but we want to leave you with a call to action. This week, take some time to reflect on your leadership practices and ask yourself, am I creating a culture where ethical behavior is encouraged and celebrated? Again, think about Warren Buffett and Tim Cook. Have I clearly communicated my values to my team? Do you know what your values are? What steps can I take to improve my ethical decision making? Start small. Maybe it's holding a discussion with your team about values, reading a case study on ethical leadership. We gave you two, or even reevaluating your personal leadership framework. Growth begins with intentional action.
And we would love to hear from you. Share your reflection, your stories, or questions in the comments, or contact us directly. We would love that. We would love to hear from you. So let's keep the conversation going and learn from each other, because again, it takes a village. And your input is valuable if you allow yourself to understand the challenges that you're going to face as leaders. And so we just want to strive to lead with integrity.
And lead by example, right?
Absolutely.
Thank
We've
you,
been taught that well.
Yeah, yes, lead by. I'm telling you, that's my thing. I picked up on that in OCS. Standards, no compromise. You got to lead by example.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So, Dr. Sanders, thank you. Brother-in-law, thank you for your invaluable insights today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploring and strengthening ethical leadership. Make sure you tune into our next episode, where we'll be talking about inspiring ethical practices through communication. We'll be discussing how leaders can use their voice and influence. Super good. I have a book I'm reading. I'll tell you all about that. But how leaders can use their voice and their influence to create lasting change in their organizations and beyond. So that concludes today's episode of The Voice of Virtue, Communicating Ethics in a Cynical World. It's been a privilege to explore the complexities of ethical leadership with you. And again, to all of our listeners, remember that every decision you make as a leader has the potential to inspire trust, foster collaboration, and uphold integrity. So, make sure you're making the best decisions. Commit to transparency, empathy, and accountability, because that set the standards for others to follow. Thank you again to my co-host and my brother-in-law, Dr. Terrance Sanders, for sharing his wisdom and knowledge and insights with all of us today. And to all of you again for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this vital conversation. Again, make sure you join us for our next series. It's going to be called The Ripple Effect. That's the overall series, The Ripple Effect, how one ethical choice can inspire many. It's like that little pebble when you drop it in a pond and it just, okay? That's how ethics are, right?
Yes.
So,
love that topic.
Yeah, I love the ripple effect. I told you that's how it works. Thank you to Mr. Stephen Ennison for keeping us on target. And again, please join us on the Transformation Network for our new series on Thursday, February the 6th at, February 6th, 2025. We're almost there, y'all, 2025 at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until next time, stay thoughtful and ethical and lead by example. This is Dr. Vaughn and
Dr. Terrance Sanders.
Signing off from Leading by Example, upholding standards without compromise. Take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Absolutely.
You have been listening to Leading by Example, upholding standards without compromise. I am your host, Dr. Vaughn, bringing you inspiring excellence, one lesson at a time. Tune in to Transformation Talk Radio every first and third Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific for fun, practical, and educational stories, as I share lessons, both the good and the bad, that I have learned in my 20 years of leadership and management experience. As we go through and learn these lessons, I would ask you to be thinking about those lessons that you bring, that you could share for potential, hey, you may even want to be a guest on our show. So think about those lessons as we continue to explore inspiring excellence, one lesson at a time. For more information, please visit www.enterosolutions.com. That's ENTERO.